My name is Brandon, and at 30 years old, I never thought my own parents would betray me like this. When my grandfather passed away, he left me $120,000 specifically for my education. It was his final gift to help me become a doctor. Then, one day, I discovered the unthinkable. My parents had secretly used every penny to buy my sister a house. The pain cut deep, but I refused to be a victim. I methodically planned my revenge, determined to get back what was rightfully mine. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button, and subscribe if you believe family should never steal from family. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in Rochester Hills, Michigan, where my childhood seemed normal on the surface. My parents, Robert and Margaret Anderson, worked steady jobs. Dad as a sales manager at a local car dealership, and Mom as an elementary school administrator. But from my earliest memories, there was always an unmistakable difference in how they treated me compared to my younger sister Allison. Allison was 3 years younger, and somehow always the center of attention. When I brought home straight, as my parents would nod approvingly, before quickly shifting the conversation to Allison's school play or soccer game. When I won second place in the state science competition, they skipped the ceremony because Allison had a minor dance recital. The pattern was consistent and unmistakable. My saving grace was my maternal grandfather, Harold Blackwell. Grandpa Harold had built a successful construction supply business from nothing, working his way up, from delivering lumber to owning 3 locations across Michigan. Unlike my parents, he noticed me. He valued my academic ambitions and quiet determination. Every Sunday without fail, he would pick me up in his old but immaculately maintained Ford pickup truck and take me to his lake house in Orion Township. These days became sacred to me. We would fish in the early mornings, and he would tell stories about business deals and life lessons learned the hard way. By afternoon, we might work on fixing something around the property, replacing deck boards, troubleshooting the boat motor, or maintaining his vintage motorcycle. Brandon, paying attention to details, separates the successful from the merely talented, he would say, teaching me to triple-check measurements before cutting wood, or to properly organize tools so they would last decades. What I treasured most were our conversations. Grandpa Harold would ask about my classes, actually listening to my answers. He would challenge my thinking with questions that made me consider different perspectives. When I expressed interest in medicine after a biology teacher sparked my curiosity about the human body, Grandpa Harold bought me medical textbooks and arranged for me to meet his friend, who was a cardiologist. These moments stood in stark contrast to life at home, where conversations revolved around Allison's activities or my parents' social calendar. Grandpa noticed this dynamic too. Once, when dropping me home, after I had spent the weekend helping him renovate his bathroom, he watched how my parents barely acknowledged my return before gushing over a painting Allison had made. "Your parents mean well, Brandon," he told me quietly as we unloaded my backpack from his truck, "but some folks can only see what is right in front of their faces. Others like you and me, we see potential. We see the future. Remember that." I learned later that Grandpa Harold had multiple discussions with my parents about their financial habits. He was concerned about their tendency to overspend on appearances, the luxury cars they leased despite struggling with the payments, the expensive vacations they charged to credit cards, and the constant home renovations they could not afford. My father particularly resented these conversations, viewing them as meddling. "Your father thinks money grows on trees," Grandpa once confided in me during my junior year of high school. He never understood that wealth comes from patience and smart choices, not from looking wealthy. During my senior year of high school, everything changed. Grandpa Harold was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start, 6 months at most. I spent every possible moment with him, often doing homework in the hospital room while he received treatments. It was during one of these hospital visits, with the winter sun setting early outside his window, that we had the conversation that would later prove so important. "Brandon," he said, his voice weaker, but his eyes still sharp, "what are your plans after graduation?" I told him about the pre-med program at the University of Michigan, my dream of becoming a surgeon, and my worry about the cost. "Education is the one investment that nobody can take from you," he said, reaching for my hand. I want you to focus on becoming the best doctor you can be, not on how to pay for it. I am setting aside money specifically for your education. $120,000. It should cover your undergraduate degree with some left for medical school." I protested, overwhelmed by his generosity, but he was firm. "I have watched you grow into a thoughtful, hard-working young man. This money is for your education, nothing else. I have seen how your parents manage money, which is why this will be structured properly. This is between us." Grandpa Harold passed away 3 months before my high school graduation. The funeral was solemn, with many business associates and friends sharing stories about his integrity and generosity. My parents seemed appropriately sad, but I noticed them perking up when the reading of the will was mentioned. The will reading occurred 2 weeks later in the office of Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Peterson. My parents, Allison, and I sat in leather chairs as Mr. Peterson explained the distribution of assets. Grandpa had been fair. His house and general savings were split between my mother and her brother. Various personal items went to specific people. Then came the part about my education fund. To my grandson, Brandon Anderson, I leave a dedicated educational trust in the amount of $120,000 to be used exclusively for tuition books and living expenses while pursuing higher education. I saw a flash of something cross my father's face. Disappointment. Anger. It disappeared quickly. My mother squeezed my hand and whispered, "Congratulations, Mr. Peterson." Explained that since I was 18, the trust would be managed by my parents as fiduciaries until I completed my education, with disbursements made directly to the educational institutions or to me with proof of educational institutions' expenses. I left the attorney's office that day feeling a bittersweet mixture of grief and gratitude. Grandpa Harold was gone, but he had made sure I could achieve the dreams we had discussed during those precious Sunday afternoons at the lake house. I had no idea that my parents were already formulating plans to betray both me and my grandfather's final wishes. The University of Michigan acceptance letter arrived in April, along with a welcome package for the pre-med program. When I showed my parents, they offered lukewarm congratulations. "That is great, honey," Mom said before adding, "though there are so many expenses for a family these days." Dad nodded in agreement. "The trust your grandfather left will certainly help, but remember, there are many needs in this family." Their comments struck me as odd, but I was too excited about starting college to dwell on them. I spent the summer working at the local hospital as an orderly, getting valuable exposure to the medical environment while earning spending money for extras that would not be covered by my education fund. September arrived quickly, and I moved into my dorm with high hopes. The first semester flew by in a blur of anatomy classes, chemistry labs, and study groups. When tuition for the second semester came due in December, I reminded my parents about making the payment from the trust. "We will take care of it," Dad assured me over the phone. "The investments we made with the trust need a few days to liquidate." I thought nothing of it at first. The payment was made just before the deadline, and I continued focusing on maintaining my GPA. However, by the start of my sophomore year, a pattern began to emerge. Every time tuition was due, there would be delays and excuses. "The market is down right now, Brandon. We need to wait for a better time to sell those investments. The bank is being difficult about releasing the funds. There was a paperwork issue, but we will sort it out." Halfway through my sophomore year, I received an email from the financial aid office requesting a meeting. When I arrived, a concerned administrator informed me that my tuition payment was now 30 days overdue. "But my parents said they made the payment last week," I explained, confused and embarrassed. "I am sorry, but we have no record of any payment this semester," she replied gently. "If it is not resolved soon, you might need to consider a payment plan or student loans to continue." That evening I called my parents, trying to keep the panic from my voice. "Oh, that," Mom said dismissively. "There was a mix-up with the bank. We will handle it tomorrow." The payment eventually went through, but I was now deeply concerned. I began working part-time at a campus coffee shop to have some financial security. By junior year, the pattern worsened. I was now working 30 hours weekly between 2 jobs, the coffee shop and weekend shifts at a local research lab. My grades began to suffer as I struggled to balance work and academics. When I would call home about tuition payments, the excuses grew more elaborate. The trust had some investment losses, Brandon. We are trying to recover them. The economy is affecting everyone right now. You need to understand that. We had to use some of the funds for an emergency, but we will replace it. I began receiving notices about unpaid housing bills. My meal plan was suspended at one point until I paid from my own savings. Each semester became a stressful cycle of payment delays, frantic calls home, and increasing hours at work. The pre-med advisor noticed my slipping grades and called me in for a meeting. Brandon, your test scores show you understand the material, but your assignments are often late or incomplete, she said. Is everything okay? I was too embarrassed to explain the full situation, so I simply mentioned financial concerns requiring me to work more than I should. She suggested I might need to take a lighter course load, but that would delay my graduation and med school applications. By senior year, I was exhausted. My once perfect GPA had dropped to a respectable, but not outstanding 3.4. I had accumulated nearly $30,000 in student loans, despite the trust that should have covered everything. Each call home was met with vague assurances that investments were underperforming or that there were temporary issues with accessing the funds. After one particularly heated call, where I demanded to see the trust account statements, my father became defensive. We are doing our best to manage this money for you, Brandon. Your grandfather left us in charge for a reason. Do you think you know better than us? When medical school application time arrived, I faced a harsh reality. My grades, while good, were not competitive enough for top programs, and I had accumulated significant debt despite having a trust fund specifically intended to prevent this. After consultation with my advisors, I made the difficult decision to defer medical school applications for at least a year to work full-time, improve my application, and hopefully get my financial situation under control. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in biology, with a minor in chemistry. My parents and Allison attended the ceremony. Allison, now 25, had recently gotten engaged to her boyfriend of 2 years, a real estate agent named Jeff. My parents could not stop talking about wedding plans and how excited they were. We have so many plans to help them get started, Mom gushed during the post-graduation dinner that I paid for with my coffee shop tips. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment near the University Medical Center and secured a full-time position as a research assistant in a cardiovascular lab. The pay was modest, but offered valuable experience for my eventual medical school application. I lived frugally, putting aside as much as possible toward paying down my unexpected student loans. Each month, I would call my parents to ask about the status of the trust fund. Each month, the answers grew more evasive. These things take time, Brandon. The market has not been favorable. We had to reallocate some investments. I began to suspect something was seriously wrong, but I could never have imagined the true extent of my parents' betrayal. My parents' 28th wedding anniversary fell on a Saturday in April, about 10 months after my graduation. Despite our strained relationship, I decided to surprise them with a visit. I bought a modest gift certificate to their favorite restaurant and made the 2-hour drive from Ann Arbor to Rochester Hills. When I arrived at my childhood home around 11 in the morning, I noticed both my parents' cars in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar SUV that I later learned belonged to Allison's fiancé, Jeff. I was about to ring the doorbell when I heard raised voices coming from the partially open dining room window. Curiosity got the better of me, and I paused to listen. The mortgage approval came through. My mother sounded ecstatic. The lender said, "The down payment really made the difference." "Well, it should have," my father replied. $120,000 is nothing to sneeze at. That kind of cash up front convinced them to overlook their mediocre credit scores. My blood ran cold. $120,000, the exact amount of my education trust. "I still think we should tell Brandon something," my mother said, her voice lower now. "He keeps asking about the trust." "Tell him," what my father's tone was dismissive, "that we invested in his sister's future. Instead, Allison has a family starting. She needs a proper home. Brandon is just one person. He will be fine." I stood frozen on the front step, unable to process what I was hearing. Before I could decide what to do, the front door swung open, revealing Allison. "Brandon," she exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" I mumbled something about the anniversary as she ushered me inside. My parents emerged from the dining room, their faces showing momentary alarm before shifting to welcoming smiles. "What a wonderful surprise," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "We were just discussing some exciting news." "Oh," I managed to respond, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Yes," Allison beamed. "Jeff and I got approved for our dream house. Mom and Dad have been so generous with helping us." "Generous how?" I asked directly. "Well, they gave us this amazing down payment," she continued, oblivious to the tension building in me. "We could never have qualified for such a beautiful home otherwise." "That is wonderful," I said mechanically. "How much was this amazing down payment?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My father cleared his throat. "That is between us and your sister," he said firmly. "Family helps family." "Family helps family," I repeated slowly. "Is that why you helped yourself to my education trust?" "The $120,000 Grandpa Harold specifically left for my education." Allison's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Brandon, this is not the time." My mother interjected, her voice unnaturally high. "We are celebrating today." "I think this is exactly the time," I countered, anger now overriding shock. "I've been working 30-hour weeks while trying to complete a pre-med degree because you told me there were investment problems with my trust fund. All while you were using that money to buy Allison a house." My father's face hardened. "Your grandfather left that money in our care to manage as we saw fit." "That is a lie, and you know it." I shot back. "The trust was explicitly for my education. Nothing else." "Brandon, we made a decision, as parents," my mother said, attempting a soothing tone. "Allison needed this more than you do. You are smart and capable. You will make plenty of money as a doctor someday." "If I ever get to become one," I was shouting now. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" I had to defer medical school applications because of financial concerns, and dropping grades from working constantly. I have student loans I should never have needed. Allison looked genuinely confused. "Mom, Dad, did you really use Brandon's money for our house?" "We used family resources to help the child who needed it most," my father stated coldly. "Brandon has always been selfish, only thinking about his own goals." The accusation stung so deeply, I nearly laughed. Selfish, for wanting to use my own inheritance for its intended purpose. For working myself to exhaustion to avoid asking you for extra help. "You do not understand what it takes to provide for a family," my father continued. "Allison and Jeff needed a stable home to start their family. What were we supposed to do? Let them struggle while this money sat in an account for years? You were supposed to respect Grandpa's wishes." I was trembling with anger now. "You were supposed to act like parents who care equally about both their children." "We do care about you," my mother insisted, tears forming. "We just thought. You thought I would never find out I finished for her. You thought you could keep stringing me along with lies about investment problems until I eventually gave up asking." I turned to Allison, who looked uncomfortable but not exactly remorseful. Did you know where this money really came from?" "Not exactly," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "They just said they had money set aside they wanted to use to help us." I did not believe her for a second. The family dynamics had always been transparent. Allison was the favorite who could do no wrong. "I need proof," I said suddenly. "I want to see the house documents. I want to see exactly what happened to my trust fund." "That is none of your business," my father snapped. "It is entirely my business," I shouted back. "It is my money." "Not anymore," he said coldly. "What is done is done. You should be happy for your sister, instead of making this about yourself." Something broke inside me at that moment. The last thread of respect I had for my parents. "This conversation is not over," I said quietly. "Not by a long shot." I walked out without another word, ignoring my mother's pleas to stay and talk. The anniversary gift remained in my car, forgotten. The next day, instead of going to work, I drove to the county records office. Property transactions were public record. It took only 30 minutes to locate the deed and mortgage documents for Allison and Jeff's new home, a 4-bedroom colonial in a desirable suburb. There it was, in black and white, a down payment of $120,000, dated 6 months earlier. The exact amount of my trust fund, the exact time when my parents had finally stopped pretending to make tuition payments and told me I would need to take out loans for my final semester. Armed with this evidence, I returned to my parents' house that evening. They seemed unsurprised to see me, as if they had been expecting this confrontation. I went to the county records office, I said, without preamble, placing the property documents on their kitchen table. $120,000. Exactly the amount Grandpa left me. Exactly the amount that should have paid for my education. Brandon, you need to understand, my mother began. No, you need to understand, I interrupted. What you did was not just morally wrong, it was illegal. That money was in a trust with specific conditions. My father scoffed. Do not threaten us. We are your parents. Parents do not steal from their children, I responded. I want the money back. All of it. That is impossible, my father said dismissively. The money is gone, invested in your sister's house. It is done. Nothing is done, I insisted. If you will not make this right, I will find people who will. What are you going to do? Sue your own parents? My father laughed. Over money. Your sister needed more than you. If necessary, yes, I said, surprised by my own calm. You would never go through with it, my mother said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. Watch me. I gathered the documents and headed for the door. You will never amount to anything anyway, my father called after me. Your grandfather always overestimated you. I paused at the door, his words cutting deeper than he could know. But instead of breaking me, they crystallized my resolve. Grandpa Harold was the only one who ever saw me clearly, I said quietly, and I will not let you dishonor his memory by stealing what he meant for my future. I walked out and drove away, knowing I might never see my childhood home again. The family I had known was gone, replaced by the stark reality of their betrayal. But as the initial shock faded, determination took its place. I would get back what was rightfully mine, no matter what it took. The next few weeks passed in a fog of betrayal and disbelief. I went through the motions at work, but my mind constantly replayed the confrontation with my parents. Some nights I would sit in my small apartment staring at the wall, wondering how the people who raised me could justify their actions. Other times, rage would surge through me so powerfully I had to go for long runs just to exhaust myself enough to think clearly. I cycled through all the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, but acceptance never came. This was not something I could or would accept. The betrayal was too profound, the injustice too great. 3 weeks after discovering the truth, I received a text message from an unexpected source, Tyler Reynolds, a friend from undergraduate biochemistry classes who had gone on to law school instead of pursuing medicine. We had fallen out of touch, but he was reaching out because he would be in Ann Arbor for a conference. We met at a quiet bar near campus. After catching up on the past year, the conversation turned to our current situations. When Tyler mentioned he had recently joined a law firm specializing in trust litigation, something clicked in my mind. I might actually need legal advice, I said cautiously. Tyler raised an eyebrow. What kind of legal advice? I told him everything. The trust my grandfather had established, my parents' misappropriation of the funds, the confrontation, and their refusal to make things right. Tyler listened intently occasionally, asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he looked genuinely troubled. Brandon, what your parents did was not just morally wrong, he said, echoing my own words to my parents. It was illegal on multiple levels. They breached their fiduciary duty as trustees. They committed what could be considered fraud. What can I do about it? I asked. Do you have a copy of the trust document? The one that specifically stated the money was for education. I shook my head. I only saw it briefly at the will reading. My parents would have the copy. That is our first step then, Tyler said, shifting into professional mode. We need to get that document from your grandfather's attorney. What was his name? Peterson. James Peterson. His office is in Royal Oak. Tyler nodded. I can help you draft a request. As the beneficiary, you have a right to see the trust documents. That conversation with Tyler marked the beginning of my methodical plan to reclaim what was mine. The next day, I called Mr. Peterson's office. After verifying my identity, his assistant emailed me a copy of the trust document. The language was unambiguous. This sum of $120,000 is to be held in trust for the exclusive purpose of funding Brandon Anderson's higher education, including, but not limited to, tuition-required educational materials and reasonable living expenses while enrolled as a student. Furthermore, the document explicitly stated, "The trustees shall make distributions only for verified educational expenses and shall provide annual accountings to the beneficiary upon request." I had never received any accountings, nor had my parents limited distributions to educational expenses. They had violated nearly every provision of the trust. Tyler introduced me to a financial forensic specialist, who helped trace the money trail. We followed the paper trail from the initial establishment of the trust through a series of transfers that eventually led to the down payment on Allison's house. The documentation was damning. "Your case is strong," Tyler assured me, after reviewing our findings. "But you should be prepared for how ugly this could get. Family lawsuits are emotionally brutal." "They stopped being family when they stole my future," I replied, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. We developed a multi-phase strategy. First, we would approach my parents with the evidence and a formal demand for restitution. If that failed, we would file a civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion of trust assets. We would also notify the district attorney about potential criminal fraud, though Tyler cautioned that prosecutors were often reluctant to pursue criminal charges in family financial matters unless the evidence was overwhelming. "The key is to build pressure from multiple angles," Tyler explained. "The civil suit threatens their finances. The potential criminal aspect threatens their freedom and reputation. Often people settle when they realize how much they stand to lose." I spent hours compiling documentation, bank statements showing transfers from the trust property records for Allison's house emails and text messages where my parents had made excuses about the investment problems with the blank trust. I even found old voicemails I had saved where my mother mentioned temporarily using the funds for other purposes but promising to put it back. My grandfather's attorney, Mr. Peterson, was shocked when I showed him the evidence. He agreed to provide a sworn statement about the intent and terms of the trust, adding another powerful piece to our legal arsenal. "Harold would be furious," he told me, shaking his head. "He set this up specifically to protect your education from, well, from exactly this kind of thing." As painful as it was to admit, Mr. Peterson confirmed what I had long suspected. My grandfather had structured the trust as he did because he did not trust my parents' financial judgment. He had seen their pattern of prioritizing appearances and short-term wants over long-term needs. He had tried to protect me, but had ultimately underestimated their willingness to betray both his wishes and their own son. The final piece of preparation involved something that felt uncomfortable but necessary. Tyler suggested I record any future conversations with my family. Michigan was a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning I could legally record conversations I participated in without informing the other parties. "It might seem extreme," Tyler acknowledged, "but if they admit to misappropriating the funds or make threats that evidence could be crucial." I purchased a high-quality recording device and installed a call recording app on my phone. The Brandon, who had trusted his family, was gone, replaced by someone more cautious, more strategic, and far less forgiving. By the end of June, 2 months after discovering the betrayal, we were ready to launch our plan. The education fund that should have launched my medical career had instead become the catalyst for an education of a different sort, one in family betrayal legal strategy, and the cold reality that sometimes justice must be forcibly taken, rather than freely given. I sat in my apartment the night before, sending our first formal letter, looking at photographs of happier times. There was one of my grandfather and me fishing at the lake house, both of us grinning widely with our catch. Another showed my family at my high school graduation, everyone smiling as if nothing was wrong. The contrast between those images and the current reality felt surreal. I picked up the photo of my grandfather and spoke to it softly. "I will make this right, Grandpa. They will not get away with this." The next morning I mailed a certified letter to my parents officially beginning the fight for what was rightfully mine. The certified letter to my parents was carefully drafted, with Tyler's legal expertise. It outlined the evidence we had gathered, cited the specific trust provisions they had violated, and demanded full restitution of the $120,000 plus legal fees and interest. The letter gave them 15 days to respond before we would pursue all available legal remedies. My phone rang 3 days later. My father's name flashed on the screen. I activated the recording app before answering. "Brandon, this is ridiculous," he began without preamble. "A legal letter to your own parents." "Did you read it carefully?" I asked calmly. "Of course I read it. This talk about breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation is absurd. We made a parental decision about family resources." "It was not a family resource," I countered. "It was a legally established trust for my education. You had no right to use it for anything else." "We are your parents," he said, as if that explained everything. "We decide what is best for this family." "The law disagrees," I replied. "And so would Grandpa Harold." "Do not bring him into this," my father snapped. "You have no idea what he would think." "Actually, I do. Mr. Peterson has provided a statement about Grandpa's explicit intentions for that money." A pause. "You involved Peterson in this." "I involved everyone necessary to get back what is legally mine. If you continue with this, you can consider yourself no longer part of this family." My father threatened, his voice cold. "You made that decision when you stole from me," I replied. "The money needs to be repaid in full or the civil complaint will be filed on day 16. He hung up without another word. The deadline came and went with no response from my parents. As promised, we filed the civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of trust assets, and constructive fraud. The complaint detailed how my parents had violated their legal obligations as trustees and sought the return of the $120,000 plus interest, legal fees, and punitive damages. The sheriff served them with the lawsuit papers on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday evening, the story had somehow reached my parents' social circle. I later learned that another parent at my mother's school had a paralegal daughter who had seen the filing and mentioned it. My mother called, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. "Do you have any idea what you have done? People are talking. Your father and I can barely show our faces at church or community events." "I am simply seeking justice for what was stolen from me," I replied evenly. "We did not steal anything. We made a parental decision. A decision to take money that legally belonged to me and give it to Allison. That is the definition of stealing, Mom." "Brandon, please." Her tone shifted to pleading. "We can work something out privately. This public lawsuit is humiliating." I tried to resolve this privately. You and Dad refused. "We cannot just come up with $120,000 overnight. The money is tied up in Allison's house." "That is not my problem. You created this situation." After that conversation, I received an unexpected call from Allison. Unlike our parents, she sounded more defeated than angry. "Brandon, I need to understand what is happening," she said. "Mom and Dad are freaking out about this lawsuit." "They should be," I replied. "They stole my education trust to buy you a house." "They told me it was family money they had been saving," she insisted. "I never knew it was specifically yours." I did not believe her, but I saw an opportunity. "Well, now you know. The house you are living in was purchased with money stolen from me. Money that was supposed to fund my medical education. What do you expect us to do? Sell our dream home? I expect the $120,000 to be returned to me. How you and our parents arrange that is not my concern. This will tear the family apart, Brandon." The family was torn apart the moment they decided to steal from me. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Let me talk to them. Maybe there is a solution that does not involve courts and lawyers. You have until the first hearing. After that, it is out of my hands." While these conversations were unfolding, we proceeded with the formal complaint to the district attorney's office. Tyler had prepared a detailed package outlining the potential criminal fraud aspects of the case. As he had predicted, the prosecutor's office was hesitant to jump into what they viewed as a family financial dispute, but they agreed to review the materials and potentially open an investigation. The threat of possible criminal charges added another layer of pressure. Within days of receiving notice that the DA was reviewing the case, my parents' attorney reached out to Tyler to discuss settlement options. Their initial offer was laughable: a payment plan of $500 a month that would take 20 years to repay the principal with no interest or legal fees. We rejected it immediately and countered with our original demand: full repayment plus legal costs and interest. Meanwhile, the civil case moved forward. At the preliminary hearing, the judge reviewed the trust documents and seemed visibly disturbed by the clear violations. "These terms appear unambiguous," she noted. "The funds were explicitly designated for educational purposes. Counsel, do your clients dispute that they used these funds as a down payment on a property for their daughter?" My parents' attorney attempted to argue that they had acted in good faith as parents making difficult family financial decisions. The judge was unimpressed. "This was not a discretionary trust," she observed. "The purpose was clearly defined. I am scheduling an expedited discovery phase. I want all financial records related to this trust made available within 30 days. The judge's reaction seemed to shake my parents. As we left the courtroom, I overheard their attorney advising them that their position was legally tenuous and that they should consider settlement seriously. That evening, I received a call from an unexpected source: Jeff Allison's husband. "Brandon, I had no idea about any of this." He began sounding genuinely distressed. "Allison just told me the full story about where our down payment came from." "And what did she tell you exactly?" I asked, curious about what version of events he had heard. "That your grandfather left you money specifically for education, and your parents used it for our house without your knowledge or permission. Is that accurate?" "Completely accurate," I confirmed. That is wrong on so many levels," he said, sounding troubled. "I would never have accepted that money if I had known. We could have found a smaller house, saved longer something." His reaction surprised me. For the first time since this ordeal began, someone from my family's side was acknowledging the fundamental wrongness of what had happened. "I appreciate you saying that, Jeff. I am talking to Allison about options," he continued. "We might need to refinance or even sell if that is what it takes to make this right." His words gave me a glimmer of hope that resolution might be possible without dragging this through a full trial. However, I remained cautious. Words were easy. Actions would prove their sincerity. The pressure continued to build from multiple angles. The civil case proceeded through discovery, requiring my parents to provide detailed financial records. The district attorney's office contacted them for interviews regarding the potential fraud investigation. And perhaps most impactfully for my status-conscious parents, the situation had become known throughout their social circle. My mother called again this time, without the anger that had characterized her previous communications. "Brandon, this has gone far enough. We are your parents. We raised you, supported you. How can you do this to us?" "How could you steal from me?" I countered. "How could you take the money Grandpa specifically left for my education and give it to Allison?" "We made a mistake," she admitted finally. "We thought we would be able to replace it before you needed it all. With what money, Mom, you and Dad have always lived beyond your means. You have never saved adequately for anything." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "What will it take to end this?" "Exactly what the lawsuit demands. Full repayment of the $120,000 plus the interest it would have earned plus my legal fees. We would have to sell investments, maybe take out a home equity loan." Again, not my problem. You created this situation. Another week passed before my parents' attorney contacted Tyler with a serious settlement offer. They proposed returning the full $120,000 within 60 days plus $15,000 for legal fees. The only sticking point was the interest. They were offering considerably less than we had calculated. Tyler and I discussed the proposal. "It is close to what we demanded," he advised. "Going to trial would likely get you the full amount, but it would take much longer and create even more family trauma. Sometimes a bird in hand is worth two in the bush." I considered his advice. If they acknowledge in writing what they did, I will accept the reduced interest. The settlement agreement was drafted and signed within days. My parents would return the full $120,000 within 60 days plus $15,000 for legal fees and $10,000 in interest, less than we had initially calculated, but still a substantial acknowledgement of their wrongdoing. Crucially, the agreement included a written admission that they had misappropriated trust funds that were specifically designated for my education. The district attorney's office, upon learning of the settlement, decided not to pursue criminal charges, which I had mixed feelings about. Part of me wanted my parents to face the full consequences of their actions, but another part recognized that criminal fraud charges would have permanently destroyed any possibility of future reconciliation, however remote that might be. The settlement agreement was signed, but that did not mean my parents immediately accepted their defeat gracefully. The 60-day period for repayment became a time of intense emotional pressure from various family members. My mother vacillated between tearful pleas for forgiveness and passive-aggressive comments about ungrateful children. My father remained coldly distant, communicating only through their attorney. Extended family members began taking sides. Some understood my position entirely, particularly those who had known my grandfather well and recognized how important his wishes were. My great-aunt Clara, my grandfather's sister, called me to express her support. "Harold would be proud of you standing up for yourself," she told me. "He worked so hard his whole life and was so careful about his legacy. What Robert and Margaret did was unconscionable." Others, particularly on my father's side, viewed me as the villain in the story, the ungrateful son suing his own parents. My father's brother left me a scathing voicemail. "Family matters should stay within the family. Taking your parents to court is disgraceful, no matter what you think they did wrong." I stopped responding to these messages after a while. The people who mattered, those who truly understood the situation, supported me, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the legal process continued moving forward. Though we had a settlement agreement, the court retained jurisdiction to ensure compliance. We had our first status conference 30 days after signing the agreement. My parents' attorney reported that they were making good faith efforts to secure the funds, but had not yet gathered the full amount. The judge seemed skeptical and set another conference for 2 weeks later, making it clear that she expected significant progress by then. "The court takes settlement agreements very seriously," she warned. "If the defendants cannot fulfill the terms they agreed to, we may need to revisit the underlying claims." After the hearing, I overheard a tense conversation between my parents and their attorney in the courthouse hallway. "You assured us we could get an extension if needed," my father was saying. "I said we could ask for one," their attorney replied. "But this judge is clearly not inclined to grant it without extraordinary circumstances. You need to liquidate those investments as discussed." "But the market is down right now," my father protested. "We will lose money." "You will lose more if the judge reinstates the original complaint with punitive damages," the attorney countered. I walked away, struck by the irony. My parents were now using the same "the market is down" excuse, with their own attorney, that they had used with me, about my trust fund. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call from Allison. Her tone was subdued, almost contrite. "Brandon, I need to tell you something," she began hesitantly. I knew. "About the money, I mean. Not at first, but after we got the house. Dad let it slip during an argument with Mom. I should have said something to you, but I was scared of losing our home." Her confession confirmed what I had suspected, but still hit me hard. "You let me struggle through college, working multiple jobs, taking out loans, while you enjoyed a house bought with money meant for my education. And you said nothing." "I know," she whispered. "There is no excuse. Jeff and I have been talking. We want to help make this right." "How?" "We are considering selling the house. We could get enough to repay you, and still have some equity left to buy something smaller." Her offer surprised me. "Are Mom and Dad pressuring you to do this?" "Actually, no. They are still trying to come up with the money without involving our house. This is coming from Jeff and me. He feels strongly that we should not be living in a home purchased with stolen money." The conversation left me with mixed emotions. On one hand, I appreciated that Allison was finally acknowledging her role in the situation. On the other, the damage to our relationship felt irreparable. How could I ever trust her again? The next court date arrived quickly. This time, my parents had made more progress. Their attorney reported that they had secured $70,000 by liquidating some investments and were in the process of obtaining a home equity line of credit for the remainder. The judge seemed satisfied with this progress but maintained the pressure. I expect full compliance with the settlement terms by the original deadline. No extensions will be granted absent truly extraordinary circumstances. As the deadline approached, the family dynamics grew increasingly complicated. Jeff called to inform me that he and Allison had listed their house for sale despite my parents' objections. "Your dad is furious with us," he explained. "He thinks we are undermining his efforts to handle this without touching your sister's house. But Allison and I agree. We cannot keep living there knowing how it was purchased." Their house sold surprisingly quickly. The real estate market in their area was hot, and the property was desirable. The sale provided enough to cover the remaining amount my parents owed under the settlement, with some left over for Allison and Jeff to put toward a more modest home. 2 days before the court deadline, the full settlement amount was transferred to the escrow account established by our attorneys. $120,000 in principal, $15,000 in legal fees, and $10,000 in interest. The final court appearance was brief. The judge confirmed that the settlement had been satisfied in full and dismissed the case. As we left the courtroom, I locked eyes with my parents for the first time in weeks. My mother looked devastated, my father defiant. Neither approached me, and I did not approach them. Allison, standing slightly apart from our parents, gave me a small nod. Not quite an apology, not quite forgiveness sought, but an acknowledgement of sorts. Outside the courthouse, Tyler shook my hand. "Congratulations. It is rare to see such a complete victory in cases like this." "Does it feel like victory?" I asked, suddenly aware of the emotional toll the past months had taken. "Maybe not today," he replied thoughtfully. "But you stood up for yourself and for your grandfather's wishes. The money is back where it belongs, funding your education and future. That matters." As I drove home, I realized he was right. This had never been just about the money. It was about justice, about honoring my grandfather's legacy, and about establishing that I would not be the family doormat any longer. That evening, I received a text from Allison. "We close on a small townhouse next month. Not what we had, but it is honest. I am truly sorry, Brandon. I hope someday you can forgive me." I did not respond immediately. Forgiveness would take time if it came at all. But her acknowledgement of the wrong was at least a start. My parents, meanwhile, remained distant. My mother sent occasional messages that alternated between guilt-inducing laments about family discord and surface-level updates about their lives, as if nothing had happened. My father maintained his silence. The extended family gradually stopped taking sides as the legal matters concluded. Some relationships were permanently damaged, while others slowly began to heal. My great-aunt Clara invited me to Sunday dinners, a tradition that helped fill the void left by my estrangement from my immediate family. With the legal battle concluded and the money recovered, I could finally return to my original plan. I applied to medical schools for the following year, my application significantly strengthened by the research position I had held. The reclaimed trust funds would now serve their intended purpose, supporting my medical education just as my grandfather had wished. The settlement money arrived in my account on a Thursday morning, $145,000 in total. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the account balance on my laptop screen, feeling a complex mixture of vindication relief and lingering sadness. This money represented not just my reclaimed educational future, but also the permanent alteration of my family relationships. My parents had ultimately sold some investment properties and taken out a home equity loan to cover most of the settlement. Allison and Jeff contributed the remainder from the sale of their house, which had closed the previous week. They had indeed purchased a modest townhouse, significantly downsizing from the spacious home my parents had helped them buy with my stolen trust fund. The first thing I did with the recovered money was pay off the student loans I had been forced to take out, nearly $30,000, that should never have been necessary. Then I established a new trust with ironclad legal protections, naming myself as the beneficiary and a professional trustee management company as the administrator. No family member would ever again have access to these funds. With my financial situation finally secured, I could refocus on my goal of becoming a doctor. I had received acceptance letters from 3 medical schools, including my top choice at the University of Michigan. The trust would cover tuition and living expenses just as my grandfather had intended. 2 weeks after the case concluded, I received an unexpected letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, which had been emotionally manipulative, this one seemed more reflective. Brandon, I cannot undo what happened, though I wish I could. Your father and I made a terrible mistake, letting our favoritism blind us to the wrong we were doing to you. I am not asking for forgiveness right now, just acknowledging the truth. The truth is, we failed you as parents. We put Allison's wants above your needs, and betrayed not just you, but also your grandfather who trusted us. I hope someday we might find a way back to some kind of relationship, but I understand that may never happen. I will respect whatever boundaries you need to set. The letter was not a magical fix, but it was the first genuine acknowledgement from either parent of the fundamental wrong they had committed. I did not respond immediately, needing time to process my feelings. Meanwhile, I began the process of establishing a new life. I found an apartment near the medical school campus and prepared for the intense journey ahead. The focus on my studies provided a welcome distraction from family drama. Allison continued to reach out periodically with brief, non-intrusive texts. She seemed to be making a genuine effort to respect my space while indicating she was open to reconciliation when and if I was ready. Jeff occasionally added messages of support for my medical school journey. My father maintained his distance for nearly 6 months. Then one Saturday morning he called. I almost did not answer, but curiosity won out. Brandon, he began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I wanted to let you know, I am seeing a therapist. He is helping me understand my behavior patterns, especially regarding you and Allison. I remained silent, unsure how to respond. I had a revelation during a session, he continued. When you were born, you looked so much like my father, a man who never thought I was good enough, who criticized everything I did. I think I transferred some of those feelings to you unfairly. It does not excuse what happened with the trust fund, but I am trying to understand why I could justify something so wrong. Thank you for telling me, I said finally, not ready to offer more. Would you consider meeting sometime? No pressure, no expectations, just coffee. I considered his request. Not yet. I need more time. I understand. The offer stands when and if you are ready. That conversation marked the beginning of a very slow, cautious reconnection with my family. It was not a Hollywood reconciliation, no tearful group hugs or instant forgiveness. Instead, it was a gradual, careful rebuilding with clear boundaries. I agreed to occasional family dinners, always in public restaurants, rather than at their home, which still held painful memories. These meetings were initially awkward, but gradually became more comfortable as we established a new dynamic, one where my boundaries were respected and my achievements celebrated rather than minimized. My relationship with Allison evolved into something unexpected. Her experience of losing the grand house and moving to a modest townhouse had changed her perspective considerably. She seemed humbled by the consequences of her and our parents' actions. When she became pregnant with her first child the following year, she asked if I would be willing to be the baby's godfather, a gesture of trust I found moving, even if our relationship would never be what it once was. As for my grandfather's legacy, I honored it in the best way I knew how, by excelling in medical school. The education he had wanted to fund was finally happening, and I approached it with a dedication born partly from wanting to make him proud. During my second year of medical school, I established a small scholarship in Harold Blackwell's name for students pursuing medical education who demonstrated both academic excellence and ethical integrity. It was my way of extending his legacy beyond just my own education. The process of healing from family betrayal was neither quick nor complete. There were still holiday gatherings where old tensions simmered beneath polite conversation. There were still moments when a casual comment would trigger memories of the pain and betrayal. But there was also growth, on all sides. My parents never fully regained my trust, but they earned a measure of respect by honoring the boundaries I established and by genuinely working to understand how their favoritism had damaged our family. My father's therapy continued addressing deep-seated issues that had influenced his parenting. My mother joined him, eventually confronting her own role in enabling the family dynamics. As I approached graduation from medical school 4 years later, I reflected on the journey that had brought me there. The trust fund battle had been painful, but necessary. It had taught me invaluable lessons about self-advocacy, about the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it hurts, and about the complex nature of family relationships. The money my grandfather left me had ultimately served its intended purpose, funding the education that launched my medical career. But the experience had provided an education of a different sort, one in resilience, boundaries, and the courage to demand justice. I sometimes wonder what Grandpa Harold would think of how everything unfolded. I believe he would be sad about the family conflict, but proud that I had stood up for myself and for his wishes. After all, he was the one who taught me that integrity matters, that details make the difference, and that some principles are worth fighting for. My story does not have a perfect ending. Few real stories do. Family relationships remain complicated. Trust once broken is never quite the same. But I found my way forward, reclaimed what was rightfully mine, and built a life that honors my grandfather's legacy. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is refusing to accept injustice, even when it comes from those who should love you most. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought for what was rightfully yours, or would you have let it go for the sake of family peace? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, family should be about love and support, not exploitation. Take care of yourselves and each other.